We are live. Yeah, I can see a lot of attendants joining in. Welcome, guys, for the first major event for APAC as part of Presales Collective. Just give us a few moments before we get started. We see a lot of guys just joining in.
Hey everybody, glad to have you all here.
So just give us a few moments before we get started. It's just on the hour. So we'll just give a couple of minutes for the other attendees to also join in. And just a suggestion, it would be good if you can go to the gallery view, because then you'll be able to see the presentation as well. And you'll be able to also post in your questions through the Q&A and the chat section.
Why is it so low? Is it?
Hey guys, thanks for joining in. We still have a minute before we start. Thanks for joining and making this event a success, right? So just give it a minute before we get started with the proceedings, right? So Shakti, hope you are all ready to talk about how to use storytelling in pre-sales.
Okay, excited to be here, Kishore. Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, storytelling has been a fantastic topic, because me and James, when we started talking about how do we go about hosting events for APAC region, one of the things that struck me was we always find it difficult to articulate value to our customer. And I always felt storytelling as one of the strong ways of articulating the value in a way that the customer always remembers your presentation when he actually takes the decisions around it. So that's how the whole idea came up. And that's when we reached out to you for helping us out with this, right?
No, absolutely makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. I guess we will get started in a moment. I think we are 3 minutes into the hour. So let's quickly get started. So hello, guys. Thanks for making it for the presentation. This is our first major event for APAC, where we're gonna talk about how do you use storytelling techniques in pre-sales, right? So next slide, please. Yeah. So like I said, thanks for making it possible, because without you guys, this community would not even exist. So we are, if you actually look at the whole pre-sales community, right? It's like a community for all pre-sales guys, right? So before we get started with the presentation, I'll just quickly give an introduction to what Presales Collective is. This is for people who are making to our first webinar from Presales Collective. So I'll just quickly run you through what Presales Collective is all about. We'll do a small and a short poll to understand the type of people who have been attending our webinars, so that we will be able to curate the right set of content for such type of people. And then I will hand it over to Shakti to take over the presentation. So Shakti, yeah. So if you look at what Presales Collective is, so Presales Collective is a global community of professionals who are passionate about pre-sales solution engineering. So this is a community where you can share your ideas, you can share your thoughts, and also learn from the community as such. So if you have not already been to our website, I would suggest go check out our website, join us. It's www.presalescollective.com. So you'll find a lot of content there that is of relevant from a pre-sales and a solution engineering perspective. And we constantly try to build high value content, and these are posted across various medium like blogs. So we have blogs that go out twice or thrice a week. Then the bi-weekly newsletter that we send out to all our members. Then the webinars that we do weekly, which one of them you are part of. And you'll also be able to check out the past ones if you want to go and check out something that you would have missed. This is a new section that we've started, the podcast. So every Monday, you'll have a fresh podcast that we put out for the Presales Collective. And these podcasts are available on all platforms, be it Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We've also started off Slack. So there are multiple channels for geography-centric conversations, ideas, etc. And also current hot topic, jobs. With the pandemic, we see a lot of job losses happening in pre-sales as well. So in the Slack channel for jobs, you'll be able to see what job options are available that you can apply for, the leadership roundtable, and a lot of discussion boards. So these are some content that is available on the website. So please go ahead and check them out. Yeah. So before we get started, a quick poll. So I'm just putting out a poll for you guys so that we get an understanding of what kind of people we have who come for these kind of webinars that we host. So please go ahead and vote. Just give it a minute or so that then we can get started with our presentation. Nice, interesting. Wow, good. So there are a lot of people who are also interested in pre-sales have joined. Fantastic. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to end the poll in a minute and in a moment, and then we will get started with the presentation of Shakti, where I'll just quickly introduce who Shakti is and what you're going to have takeaways from this presentation. Yeah. So Shakti, the next slide, please. So as I was telling you, this conversation about storytelling came up when we were looking to launch content for the APAC geography, and we felt storytelling as one of the key aspects of ensuring that the value is articulated better. So with that, I reached out to Shakti through Storytellers Tribe from Chennai, and we were able to get her for this presentation. So before I get started, let me just quickly introduce you Shakti. So Shakti heads global pre-sales for Chargebee, a SaaS subscription billing management platform based out of Chennai, right? So she's got varied experience across product management and sales. She's got a good mix of technology and management. So she's got, she loves taking up customer problems head on and loves getting out of it victorious, right? So outside work, she loves sports. She does a lot of wildlife activities, and she also reads a lot of books. So with that introduction, I'll just quickly let you know what would be our takeaways from this section. So if you see from today's session, you will understand how storytelling can help drive emotions and enable action for your stakeholders. Then in terms of how storytelling can help articulate value for your product and your solution better. And also the tricks of the trade that you can use for storytelling in pre-sales. With that, I'll just hand it over to Shakti. Shakti, all yours for the next 35 to 40 minutes.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kishore. Thanks for that.
So how do you want to do it? Do you want the Q&A to happen towards the end?
Yeah. So
Okay.
please feel free to add in your questions on the chat here, and we'll take all questions at the end. That's all right.
So we have a Q&A window for that. So you can just put in your questions as Shakti runs through a presentation. So we will take up these questions towards the end of the session. 30 minutes for you, Shakti. All the best.
Okay. Thank you, Kishore. Hey, everybody. So super excited to be here. Like Kishore mentioned, I head the pre-sales team at Chargebee. I've been with Chargebee for about 2.5 years, and it's been a whirlwind here. It's been an amazing journey. So this is quickly what we're going to cover today. Why storytelling? Why are we even talking about storytelling? Some principles and elements of storytelling and what a sales story is. Some tips based on past experiences and customer experiences, and based on that, what we can conclude from of how you could leverage storytelling in your pre-sales career. The point to start with is, if you want to sell, you have to make people want to listen to you, right? Now, at any point of time, you might be working on a software, you might be selling a product, it's a tech product, and we in the pre-sales team are primarily working on technology. We talk tech, we expect the other person to understand tech as well. But at the end of it, the other person is a person. They may be from tech, they may not be from tech. Their understanding of tech would be different from your understanding of tech. So it's important to realize that unless the person on the other side wants to listen to you, the point is not going to get across. And one of the tools of enabling this is storytelling, which is what we're going to talk about today. Storytelling is amazing in that everybody has seen this, right? Everybody has seen a version of the left brain and the right brain. The left brain, typically more analytical, logical, reasoning, works with numbers, graphs, charts, and all that. And the right brain, on the other hand, deals with feelings, emotions, art, music, as you can see on the images here, games. These are things which appeal to the right brain. And there are people who work more with the left brain, and there are people who work more with the right brain. There are people who make decisions based on the left brain or the right brain. And storytelling is right at the cusp where it actually appeals to both, right? That's the sweet spot. And storytelling is actually a tool which could help you talk to people who make decisions with their left brain or their right brain, right? Like I said, we are a tech role, but at the end of it, our problem, or the problem that we are solving, is a human problem. And we might be using technology to solve a human problem, right? For example, it could be automation of mundane tasks, it could be streamlining operations, it could be reducing tasks, it could be any kind of activity. But these are business or human problems which we are solving through technology. Now, the person on the other side may not always be at the same tech level, may not even be tech. For example, I work at Chargebee, and Chargebee is a subscription billing management software that helps businesses automate their recurring billing. Now, the people who come and talk to us may not always be from the tech side. They could be from finance, they could be from operations. They may not really be, their focus is not on the software as such, but on the business problem that we're solving. So how do you communicate to them such that they understand what you're talking about, right? So why storytelling? I have three amazing storytellers around me, right? I have my mom, who's a poet who writes short stories. I have my husband, who's a photojournalist who tells stories through his photos, who tells stories through writing about what he sees outside. And I have a 5-year-old who tells stories through the day, right? So they all use different mediums. My mom uses words, she writes down, she builds, she makes you imagine. My daughter, on the other hand, her imagination is so wild that anytime you talk to her, she comes up with absolutely random stories, which at the end of it, what is everybody trying to do? They're trying to communicate an idea. They're trying to express their idea to you. Why am I talking about my personal family on a forum like this, right? I could have told you that, hey, storytelling is a tool, storytelling is effective, and I think storytelling makes sense for a pre-sales career. I could have stopped with that. But by telling you this, everybody who has heard stories from their parents, which is almost all of us, knows what I'm talking about. Everybody who has who takes photos, who tries to express through photos, knows what I'm talking about. That is the connect that we need to build. And that is what a good pre-sales or one of the tools for a good pre-sales person is, right? By building that connection between people, by showcasing what you want to do in a manner that the other person associates with and has a takeaway from, right? It could be about it could be even turning something around to say that, hey, this is a problem that you have. I've faced similar problems before, and how do you put a positive spin on it, right? So stories are the tool that can help you take your pitch from, just showcasing feature by feature, click by click on what your product is, and taking it to the next level by connecting with the human on the other side of the table, right? And like Kishore was saying, stories encourage action, right? At the end of any story, at the end of, you remember any of the stories that you heard in your childhood, right? There would always be a moral of the story, right? There would be something which would conclude the story, which would make you think, oh, this is probably an expected behavior or an action that I could take based on this story. So what is the action that you drive through your storytelling would be an action which would help the person go up, take up your product or your service, right? These are basic principles of storytelling, not really specific to pre-sales, but it's important that we all internalize and understand what storytelling does to the person and use it to our advantage, right? Because at the end of it, we are all in the sales. We are all in a selling game. And how do you enhance that? How do you push your point forward? How do you make the customer make that decision to purchase your product or your service? And that is what we're trying to explain here, right? It is important to understand that just like we have a story, every other person on the other side has their own story. So finding that connect, it could be through anecdotes, it could be through explaining, it could be through parallel stories, it could be through examples of other stories or other customers who have faced a similar problem and overcome it through your product or solution. There are different ways in which people will actually connect with you. And it's important that you figure this out as you're going through your journey or your sales cycle with a customer. And the most important in all of this is preparation. How do you prepare for it? And we'll get to that. We'll talk about some of the ways in which you could prepare for a storytelling experience. How do you make demos, and this is specific to pre-sales, right? How do you make demos more relevant and relatable? How do you make sure that what you're talking about connects with the other person, right? These are some of the elements that are part of a sales story, which you need to kind of internalize and be able to communicate when you're talking to the customer, right? Like I said, a feature by feature click-through presentation of, hey, this is what we're talking about. My product offers XYZ feature. Nobody's interested in that. Those are things of the past. Where we need to move now is showcasing value. Everybody's heard about value engineering. Everybody's heard about the trends in the focus on pre-sales now, right? It's a growing field, as is clear. We have I think about 1,000 people in the pre-sales collective. That's huge, right? And this is not, it's just been 2 months since the pre-sales collective started. So there are so many companies that are now realizing the importance of pre-sales and value engineering, and how do we kind of drive value in the entire sales process, right? How do you convey the value that your product or service provides, right? The why. Why was your product built the way it is? Why was your solution built the way it is, right? It is important that the customer or the person on the other side understands this, so that that connect is built with them, right? They're not interested in XYZ feature, but they're interested in understanding the problem that you solve and how it is going to help them, how it is going to improve their lives or enrich their team, right? The wow factor. I mean, we've heard so much about the wow factor, but the wow factor could be a very, very small thing. I remember in one of my customer calls, I just brushed past some of the basic product features that we have, right? And then the customer said, hey, so can you do this? And then I went back and said, yeah, I mean, it's such a minor thing for me. It's not even something that I spend time on because it's so basic in my product. And they said, this is what I'm looking for, right? Now that small thing, which I thought was not even significant, was the main reason for them to go with the product, right? Now, how do you identify that? It comes with practice, it comes with more customer conversations, and it's important to kind of make a note of these so that the next time you talk to a similar persona, you bring that up and you use it in the conversation. Now, I know that the next time I talk to a similar sized business, that is something that I definitely do spend time on, because I know that that is a problem that I've solved for somebody before, and it could help me in solving, or it could help me in converting more customers to Chargebee, right? The story you build around the how, the process of it, the resultant benefits of your product, right? Now, the sales story needs to include all of these: the why, the what, the how, the where, the how, who, the when. But what, when you say the why, the what, it's not just listing of the product. It is about the story that you build around it and the story that your overall presentation conveys, right? And the who. The who, now, normally in all the conversations that we talk about in a sales story, the who is typically the product itself, right? Because we are showcasing, hey, come on, check out my product. It's so awesome. You need to check it out because it's awesome. But the hero, if you flip it and you make your customer or your prospect the hero, it completely changes the balance, right? And you say that, hey, you have a problem that I'm going to solve. I have a product and it's going to solve your problem, but you are the main person that I'm talking to. You are who I need to convince. You are who is going to get benefited from what I'm going to present today, right? So make that switch in the conversation, make that switch in your story to make the customer the hero of what you're talking about, right? And then, of course, the timelines. Now, typically, most of our conversations with customers, hey, so when are you looking to sign up, right? When are you looking to purchase the product? But it's important to delve a little further into it and talk even about timelines for reaping benefits. You could say, hey, think of it as a short-term investment, think of it as a long-term investment. Think of it as what you're going to invest in today, this month, which will help me probably in my monthly quota. But think of it as a little longer term, where at the end of 6 months, your savings by using my product would probably be this, right? So when you talk about each of these, delve a little deeper, spend a little more time, and build that story so that at the end of it, it's a comprehensive package that you're talking to the customer about, and not something which is superficial and talking only about features that are available, right? Main elements of any story, right? Like I said, the hero. The hero is the main person, and the hero in this case is not your product, is not your solution or your service. The hero needs to be the customer that you are talking to. How else do you make that person feel valued and feel that, hey, this entire thing has been done for me, right? You have to make them the hero. And then you start off by saying, okay, what is the problem that you're looking to solve? And why are you looking to solve it now? Because there are people who know that they have a problem and who are okay to wait for it because it's not yet become a critical problem, or who are starting to look out but are saying, hey, I can check it out right now, but I'm not really looking to move right now because it's not yet become a critical problem for me to address, right? So it's important that you identify the hero and then find out the problem that they're looking to solve, and then the stimulus, what is making them look for a solution for the problem that they're looking to solve. And that will help you in building the story to make the pitch to say, hey, I know this is what you're looking to solve, and this is exactly what my product does, right? That is where the pitch comes in. We also talk about the tension or conflict, right? It could be other things such as cost factors. It could be people factor. It could just be, it could be any other factors. It's important that you identify what are the different ways or different conflicts that could arise in this process so that you have your story ready to counter them, right? You've identified the problem, you've identified the stimulus on what is making them look for a solution for the problem. But if you don't know what are the other ways in which they could halt this entire process, then your sale is not going anywhere, right? So it is important that you identify these different pieces of a story and stitch them together so that it leads to the conclusion. The important point here is also the decision making. Now, the decision making includes the decision maker, the process, what are the inputs, what are all the factors that contribute towards the decision making, and you need to address that as part of your story. When I say address that, it could be how you include the different people who are going to be benefiting for it. For example, mine, like I said, Chargebee is a subscription billing management software, but it is a product that addresses people from finance, from customer success, from different teams, right? How do I make sure that I address problems of all these people, all these different heroes within my customer's organization to ensure that the decision making at the end of it is towards my goal, right? And the conclusion is your pitch. Now, if you start with the pitch and say, hey, my product is the best out there in the market, then they're going to fall flat because you've not covered the rest of it. And the hero needs to be the customer and not your product, right? So conclude strong, absolutely. Conclude with call to action, absolutely. Make the pitch, but that comes at the end. If you start with that, then the hero, the problem, all of these are getting missed, which means that you will not have addressed all of these as part of your pitch, right? This is just a sample of a process flow that we have. For example, you start with deep discovery sessions and you validate your discoveries, right? Now, different teams have different orgs, have different ways of doing the discovery. Typically, there is a sales team, there could be LDRs, SDRs in the sales team, and then the sales engineer is introduced. But you need to do your own discovery. You need to identify the hero, the problem, the stimulus, whatever we spoke about as part of the sales story. You need to discover it so that when you actually build the story based on that, you cover all of these aspects. And trust me, if I'm going to go and tell a customer, hey, my product has 250 features that I could talk to you about, or if you tell me what your problem is, I could talk to you about the 10 features which you would require the most. Was the customer going to wait and listen to my 250 feature pitch, or 10 feature pitch, which is going to be most relevant for them, right? It's about how you communicate to them. You can tell them, hey, I'm ready to do the 250 feature pitch as well. I don't have a problem. I can do that. But is that what is going to be the best use of your time? Is that what you are looking to get out of this meeting? So it's important that you spend time on the discovery process, identifying the different elements so that when you build the story, you can address each of these, right? Build the demo, set the context, and then clear call to action. Typical sales, typical pre-sales flow that we have. But the first two parts where you do the discovery and discover these elements is what is very critical as part of the storytelling process. This is something which I have found to be very, very useful. Day in the life of, right? Typically, what is a day in the life of? Now, when you talk, again, we go back to the hero concept. Who is the hero? Now, the hero, what is a day in the life of your hero? What does it look like, right? Now, put yourself in your customer's role, right? Each person on your customer side who's going to actually be using your product or your solution or your service, right? What are they looking to do? How will they interact with your product? How will they interact? How often will they interact with it? At what stage will they interact with it? In a day, how many, in between what tasks do they come to it? It is important that you live the life, live that day in that life to understand and make sure that you address all the times that they interact with your product, you address what they're looking for at each of those stages, right? You might have a pitch, you might have a product which has a core solution, but if it doesn't address every request that they come to your product for, then it's going to fall flat, right? This understanding of this day in the life of will help you again in building your story, right? Rather than saying ABC feature handles blah blah, you can say, hey, so when you need to do blah blah, you can actually come to my product and do blah blah, right? There's a difference. It is about how you communicate with respect to making the hero as a center of the message rather than making your product. Rather than talking about the feature, you're talking about how you will be using my product. And what happens is this kind of builds a visual in their head, right? When you say that, hey, so when you come in and you log in, they're imagining themselves doing it. When you come in and you open my product, they're imagining themselves doing it. So that is already half the sale, where they are already imagining using your product when they've not yet decided to go with your product, right? That's something which storytelling can do, right? Stories make the point more effectively and quicker, simply because you are talking about something which people can connect with, people associate with, people have that, I know what you're talking about. I know what you're going to say next because I simply know this story, right? And then comes the sales engineer storyteller, right? Now, sales engineer, to give you an example, I did sales for about 3 years. I did product management for about 8 years before moving on to sales engineering. And I realized that sales engineers do sales plus product plus management plus marketing, and core of it is tech, right? We are salesy, we are tech owners, we do product management and marketing. We are the direct line from the customers to the product team. So we are the GTM team, customer facing. We have our ears to the ground. We know what's going on, what are the trends in the market, what are customers looking for. We are right at the cusp of all of it, right? So we are simply managing all of these different things, and we could be telling stories in all of it. It's just a question of prioritizing and internalizing the message that, hey, what you are doing is already storytelling. All solution engineers technically are already master storytellers. It's just that when you apply the principles to it, you finally hone your skills and you practice it so that it helps you in your work, right? Small things, curiosity, being the tech expert. These are all things which we already are. You're juggling all of these already. How do you build it all together? How do you stitch it? How do you build the story around what you do? And how do you build the story around your product and then take it to the market, right? So be authentic and communicate how your product can help people in real world scenarios, right? Now, there have been multiple pitches. Now, of course, being on the receiving end, right? I've also requested for demos from, so many other products, and people have come and made the pitch to me. Invariably, what happens is when you are not authentic or when you have not bought into your own product, you cannot communicate, right? You have to be absolutely convinced that your product solves this need. You have to be sure. For example, if I didn't believe in storytelling today, and I'm trying to convince you guys that, hey, storytelling is the way to go, but if I'm not convinced about it, it's not going to happen. You're not going to believe me. You're going to say, hey, you're just here talking about it because somebody's asked you to talk about it, right? Be authentic and talk about how your product can help people in real world scenarios. Don't be afraid to use examples. Don't be afraid to use other heroes that you've spoken to. Sorry about that. Don't be afraid to pick up on past customers and make an example of them to showcase how your product can help, right? There are a few ways that I'm going to talk about in terms of bridging the gap. So one is, for example, identifying key stakeholders. Now you have champion of your product, you have decision makers, and then you have the users. It's important that you hero each of them, you identify each of them, and then you hero each of them as part of your story so that when it is relevant to them, they have the connect with what you're talking about, right? Grab attention, use current events, use humor, enhance your story, embellish your story a little bit with things which are not really core to your product, because that is where you will get the connect with your customer. And anecdotes go a long way. Anecdotes about people, anecdotes about past experiences. I spoke about my personal family at the beginning of this, right? Why did I have to do that? It is to make sure that I have that connect with people and people associate with what I'm talking about. And one thing that we kind of tend to do is when somebody says that, hey, I have this, I don't think this is going to work, we kind of brush it aside. No, that's fine. I can handle it. My product can handle it. It's fine. Highlight it. Let them highlight the obstacles, and then you showcase solutions for it, right? How do you spend time in ensuring that every concern that a customer raises actually has a solution within their product, right? Because sometimes we make the mistake of sitting and clicking through our product and showcasing like, oh, wait, let me go this, let me quickly show you how it solves. And then we end up giving them, slide vertigo where they're so confused. They don't know where you went. They don't know which part of your product you've moved to solve that problem. You don't have to do that, but it's important that you understand and make a note of all these obstacles so that you can highlight solutions for them. And the end is always the call to action, right? What is the next step? How do you conclude this? How do you move it forward, right? These are some tips, just because these have worked for me. These are tips from not just me, from my teams and from others as well. Make it about them, right? And the them here is always the hero, is always your customer, right? Make it about how they are going to benefit from your product and not how your product is going to help them. Make it a reverse flow so that they are thinking about how I, as a customer, I'm going to use your product and how it's going to benefit me, right? Provide real insights. Do not fudge data. It's very easy to say that, hey, I helped a customer improve 10% month on month, and then they're going to say, okay, give me some data, give me some, how are you going to back it up, right? Be genuine and provide real insights, right? Offer a wow moment. Like I told you, there was one customer for whom that moment in which they realized that small feature of mine actually solved such a big problem for them was a wow moment. How do you, now all of us have these moments as part of our customer conversations. Consciously make a note of them and map them out. Figure out patterns, figure out what kind of customers will look for these kind of solutions. What kind of customers will this be a wow moment for, right? It's important that you build these notes and then utilize them in further conversations. And always tell a business story and not just a feature by feature, right? It's important to realize that on a demo, you're not really training the product or training the customer on the product. It's important you're convincing them on how your product is going to handle the problem that they have, right? Visual appeal. Never dismiss the visual appeal. If possible, use visual designers where required. Make sure that how you're presenting, what you're presenting, everything is something which the customer thinks this is a trustworthy person to whom I can go to with my product, right? And always have a plan B. Plan B could be with respect to demo failing. It could be a recorded video that you already have. It could be a story that you've already scripted out so you can continue with it even if your demo fails. It could be internet issues. Anything that you have, always have a plan B, and it should include the story that you're trying to communicate, right? Now, what are we trying to do at the end of it in pre-sales? We're trying to make the sale. We're trying to tell customers that, hey, this is what my product is going to do for you, right? So help your customers imagine a world with your solution, right? And you do that by painting a picture, building the story, explaining to them. Let them imagine themselves in a real world scenario where they're using your product, and that is half the sale done, right? You already know what your product can do. Now it's up to you to tell them what your product can do and how they can benefit from your product, right? Quick note on how decisions are made. Typical decision makers in different orgs. You have the sole decision maker. You have the sole decision maker who requires board approval or any other approval. You have multiple decision makers. It's important that you identify early on in the story about who the hero is, about the decision-making process, and build your story to make sure that you address the people who are going to make the decision, right? If it is a case of multiple decision makers, but your entire story, your entire conversations have been with one person, then you've not even impacted, you've not even presented to the others, you've not even influenced them or built the story, help them imagine their life with your product yet, right? So it's important that you identify your decision makers and then build the story around that. Bottom line, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And being sales engineers, we are not called account executives, we are not called sales team. People know and trust us simply because of the role that we play. They know that we are consultants. They know that we are looking to solve their problem. So we have to make sure that we do not abuse that trust, but make sure that we use it in a way to help us with our goal and make sure that the customer is also benefited at the end of it, right? So use that trust and make the sale, right? So here are a few book recommendations from me. I spoke about the hero, highlighting the customer as the hero. A lot of that is from this book called The Hero Method by Catherine Gillett. Just effing demo, habits of highly effective sales engineers. I think at the Pre-Sales Collective, we've already had talks by Chris White and Rob Falcone as well. Words That Change Minds is a book that talks about how to move from a reactive or a responsive mode to a more proactive, using more proactive terms in the conversation so that it drives action at the end of it. It's a very different, interesting take on this. All right, thank you very much and happy storytelling, everybody.
Thanks, Shakti. That was a wonderful session. My personal takeaway from the whole session has been how to look at a hero, how to build the story around the hero, right? So fantastic session. And so there are certain elements that I also had doubts on, which you actually helped clarify. Thanks, Shakti, for that. So this concludes the session for today. And before we wind up, there are some Q&A that a couple of folks have actually posted. We'll quickly go through the Q&A and then I'll again come back to Pre-Sales Collective. There are a couple of things that I just want to put across to you. One is a poll, a quick poll again, and the events that are coming up for the future. So we have a question from Gautam. So his question is about how does the approach for storytelling differ while selling a product or a solution? So how is it different for a product and a solution?
Right. So when you have a product, it's already defined, it's already, you've already considered, or the product team or the product managers have already considered some of these personas and built it out. It is important that you work with them to identify these and understand what is the persona they had in mind while building each of these, right? And use them, once you identify your hero, use them in conversations with the hero to say, hey, this is what the product team specifically built out to handle this kind of requirement that you would typically have, right? And in solution, it's something which you are building out. So you have identified the problem, you have come up with a solution. So you build your own story around it.
Right. Hope that answers your question, Gautam. We have another question from Ashwin Dakla. So the question is, how would you see value engineering being applied in pre-sales? Any tips on how you would unlock that style of thinking in a team? I really resonate with the narrative of the hero always being the focus of your conversations across the sales cycle. Yeah.
Right. So what is value engineering, right? Value engineering is something which one of the main things that pre-sales is moving towards. Everybody's talking about value engineering. But at the end of it, what you're trying to do is explain or highlight what is the problem, what is the core value that your product is delivering to your customer. And by building the story around it, you're kind of enhancing that for the customer, right? Not sure if that answered your question, Ashwin.
Okay, moving on. Yeah, it does. So moving on, Karthik has got a question. He asked, in addition to the value prop and storytelling, how important would you rate the power of FAB, features, advantages, and benefits?
So nobody is getting away from features, advantages, and benefits. That is the core to what we do. What I'm trying to say is, by building a story around it, you showcase your features, you showcase the advantage of what you have done by building the story, by having a hero and making it from their point of view rather than explaining on the features point of view, right? So take the same features, take the same advantages and build the story, change the narrative from the hero's point of view.
So to add on to that, you can actually look at day in a life cycle, right? Look at those important events that happen. Map those features to those events and use the FAP. That would work for you, right, Shakti?
Yeah.
So we have Shabari asking about how to negotiate the large vision clients into MVP.
Sorry, can you come again?
So he wants to look at how do you negotiate large visions of clients into MVP. I'm also not sure what the question was about.
So the MVP is the minimal viable product.
Yeah, that's what.
So
Basically, I think he's trying to ask when you meet customers who have large visions, how do you talk to them and convey what goes into MVP? I guess.
okay. So here is where you need to paint the picture of the future which you've not yet built, right? You have built an MVP. You have a reasoning for why you have built the MVP the way it is. Your product team has an idea, has identified what needs to go into the MVP, which is not yet at the scale that your customer is looking for. But how do you paint the picture of what the current product solves and where you see this product going in the future? That story is what is going to help you in talking to the customer. What you see as a vision, what your org has planned as a vision for your product, and highlighting that, saying this is the future that we see. We're starting here today, but this is where we will be.
In fact, Shakti, one specific aspect of your slide that kind of resonates with what you said is you had mentioned somewhere about the customer perception is your reality, right? So
Yeah.
I think somewhere that really hits the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And we have Aditya who's asking, what if I'm connected to the customer via a third party and I don't have enough discovery information? So primarily around how do we go about doing product discovery, also not product discovery, but solution discovery at that point of time when we don't have access to a lot of information.
Yeah, that is definitely a handicap. Not having all information from the customer side is definitely a handicap. One method you could do is look at similar industries, similar products, similar customers that you've spoken to, and identify what were the common set of problems or common set of focus areas that they had, and make a extrapolation to say this is probably what they are looking for as well. But unless you're able to do a direct discovery, you will always be at a handicap.
Yeah, hope that answers. We have Mansoor asking, how can we improve storytelling skills?
Tell more stories. I mean, I mean, you have people that you can practice storytelling with. You can start off small, start off within your team, start making a pitch. You already know your own product. You already know your solution. Start practicing it. Make it, say, take it up as a weekly activity that you come and present to the rest of your own team about any one feature and turn it around. Make it about the hero and how would you present it with storytelling as the tool, right? Rather than what you're doing today, if you had to turn it around and practice it. So it's storytelling is a skill, right? And how do you improve any skill? It's only via practice. So the more you tell the stories, the more you are able to embellish with other anecdotes. And as you start going through it, you will realize that you already had a lot of these stories in your head. You just did not put it down and put it into a presentation or one single coherent thought, right?
Nice one, Mansoor. Nice question, Mansoor. Hope that answers your question. We have Mudit who is asking, as a pre-sales person, how can we learn about different industries and processes? I face challenges when I come across a client who belongs from an industry about which I don't have much knowledge about, and how to avoid or face such situations.
So this would go back to where you are introduced to the customer in the selling process and what is the lead time that you have. Because before we get on any customer call, it is important that we do our homework. It is important that we prepare for every call as if it's going to be, even if it's somebody that you've spoken to, it's important that you prepare for that call as well, right? So in this case, where especially if it's from an industry that you've not been exposed to or you've not really had a story for, use this as a chance to read up and then make sure your discovery is so thorough that you're still able to build a story.
Hope that answers you, Mudit. And we'll take one last question before we go ahead and conclude. The question is from Aditya Banerjee. So he asks, how can we effectively coordinate with the sales team so that the pitch being made by them is not just enticing, but also remains realistic with respect to the product capabilities?
So I think this comes back to the org culture, right? It is important that while the sales team, they have the quota, they have the target, everybody's making sure that the sale goes through. It is important that as an org, you have a culture where the customer is the hero. The customer is at the end of it going to be benefited by what you're doing, and you're not promising or overcommitting and under-delivering to the customer, right? It's an org culture that it needs to be there. And if you think that this is something which, because when we go on the call with the customer and then the customer says, hey, I was told this by the sales team and it's not there, it becomes very embarrassing. It becomes very difficult for us to have that conversation with the customer. So it's important that you talk to your org, talk to the leaders, make sure that the messaging across the org is the same, right? Unless it's something which you're ready to build out. If the sales team commits to something and you're ready to build it out, then it's fine. But even there are timelines, there are cost factors, there are other things which are involved. So it's important that you understand your org, the tone and what you're setting out to do as an org, and make sure that it percolates through the entire team.
Thanks, Shakti. Shakti, there's one amazing question I wanted that's come up, so I'll have to take this. So it's from Douglas. So he asks, can you give me an example of a story for a specific product or a service, or a sample story? I also wanted to ask that. So anyways, Douglas has asked it.
Okay. Kind of putting me in the spot here. I don't want to get into specifics of my product. There are a lot of examples of stories that you can find online. Again, there is no generic story for you to look at from, to say that this one story will fit all or will suit all customers or will appeal to everybody. It is important that you kind of cater it to the audience that you're talking to. It's important to have a baseline story and then enhance it with the specifics from your discovery and from your hero. Right? So there is no single story which will appeal to everybody, if that was the question.
Yes, we don't have much time now, so I think we'll wrap up our session here. So any more questions that you might have, you can reach out to me on my LinkedIn DM or Shakti's. We will try answering those questions as well. So with that, I'm almost concluding the session for today. So before you go off, I'm just switching on another poll. So basically, it is a feedback poll in terms of how did we did. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes for that so that you can go ahead and give your responses back. So this is basically to rate how we have done today. Shakti, we've had good, fantastic ratings for your session today. Thanks, Shakti, for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I had fun doing it, so I'm glad to see that people enjoyed it as well.
Yeah. So we'll just give it another 20, 30 seconds, and then I'll quickly, round the whole thing by talking about a couple of things from Presales Collective as well. There is a Slack channel. I'll just give you the link for the Slack channel and the podcast, as well as the upcoming webinars as well. So I'm just ending the poll right now. Just give 5 seconds if you have not already filled the poll out. So yeah, I think I'm just closing the poll. So so as part of Presales Collective, we have also built a Slack community. So we have the Slack community, the invite, you will find it under presalescollective.com/Slack. So you just join us there. You can give your introduction, and there are multiple channels that you can come to and start your interactions. You can ask people for help, share your ideas, so on and so forth. So please feel free to join our Slack collective. And we have a couple of interesting more webinars coming up in the next week. Shakti, can you just go to the next slide, please? So we have a webinar coming by Todd Johnson and James Kiakis. It's happening on July 15th, but it's at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So it's about making your pre-sales team an innovation center. And another coming on July 2nd, where we are talking about cultural realities to a virtual pre-sales world. It is going to happen at the same time as we are doing in India, right? So it's going to be at 12:30 p.m. IST and 9 a.m. GMT +2. It will be led by Carl Lewis from our APAC team. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So finally, we have, like I was talking about, the pre-sales podcasts are available on all major platforms. So it's available on Spotify and Apple podcasts for you to listen it at your free time, right? So that's about it. So I'll just go ahead and conclude the session for today. Thanks, Shakti, for that amazing session. It was wonderful to understand how storytelling can be leveraged in pre-sales. Thanks, guys, for participating and making this session a wonderful event. Thank you, guys. See you soon for the next session. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.